Hi, good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to see many faces here and familiar faces also. We didn't expect that. It's as it's usual on Saturdays, the EuroCrim. So, after two whole days with such engaging academic exchange and also this very adventurous conference, as Professor Lapropoulou noted during her opening speech, I think now I thought many people would like to go for a late summer vacation in Athens or on the islands, but it's nice to see you all here. This is the last panel, this is the last session, this is the last roundtable of EuroCrim 2025, of Athens EuroCrim. Since I'm also a member of the local organizing committee, I would like really to thank you all for this conference. You made it happen and you made it possible, and of course Marcelo and the European Society of Criminology, most importantly, however, Professor Lapropoulou, for organizing this whole thing. This was a difficult one, and however, I think it was a productive conference and many productive discussions. And today we have also a very important topic, I think, and what Marcelo noted in his opening speech, a challenge also for criminology, for penal law, for legal orders, for society. We are going to discuss about artificial intelligence and its intersection with criminal justice systems. And for that, we have, I have the pleasure and the honor to have with me, next to me, two real experts, global experts in the field. I'm going to introduce them to you, and then they will each have about 20 minutes for their speeches, for their talks, and then we can discuss all together some of the points that they will raise during their talks. Also, I have some questions, perhaps you have some questions. We will see how it will work out. But first of all, let me introduce you. The speakers to you. Next to me is Emmanuelle Legrand. She's from France, and she's a French judge with 20 years of experience. Emmanuelle served in criminal courts as a prosecutor, as an investigating judge, and she worked for several years in the French Ministry of Justice in the Office for Mutual Legal Assistance in Criminal Matters. And she is currently working for the French Ministry of Economy and Finance as a senior legal and policy officer on regulation of digital and data legal matters, including AI. But for our purposes and also for the purpose of this panel, most importantly, Emmanuelle, she was the lead negotiator for France on the EU Artificial Intelligence Act from 2021 to 2023, and she was also a member of the French delegation in the Council of Europe during the negotiation of the Council of Europe's Framework Convention on AI, Human Rights, Democracy, and the Rule of Law. Emmanuelle graduated in France in political science, law, and also from the French National School for the Judiciary. And she also graduated from the University of Texas School of Law at Austin, and she's a regular speaker on cyber issues, cybercrime issues, mutual legal assistance, and AI. Our other speaker, Mark Rothenberg, Professor Rothenberg at Georgetown Law since 1990. He's a frequent advisor to the US Senate on a wide range of technology issues, and he's one of the real, true leading global experts in data protection, internet policy, and AI governance. Mark is the founder and executive director of the Center on AI and Digital Policy. This is a global network of AI policy experts and of human rights advocates. This center, the Center on AI and Digital Policy, trains AI policy leaders, advises national governments, international organizations, and publishes annually important works such as the AI and Democratic Values Index and the AI Policy Sourcebook. Perhaps Mark will tell us about these works later on during his talk. Importantly also for our case, for the insights that Mark can provide in terms of regulation in this field, Mark served on the OECD AI group of experts and helped drafting one of the most important legal tools, the OECD AI principles. This was actually back in 2018, I think, the first framework for global AI governance. And Mark also drafted the Universal Guidelines for AI, a human rights framework for AI policy. Mark is the founding editor of the Journal of AI Law and Regulation, and he's involved in many projects. I do not need to read about them now, but he's very actively involved with the Council of Europe, with the American Law Institute, with the American Society for International Law on various projects on AI. So I will now, I think it's better that we move on with the speeches, and I will give the word to Emmanuel to start with a more general topic, to introduce us to the thematic, a topic on addressing and regulating the use and misuse of AI in investigations and criminal justice.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being courageous enough to actually come and listen to us on this very last day. I hope you've enjoyed your conference. It's a real honor for me to be here this year with you, and I would like to start by thanking the European Society of Criminology, and in particular Professor Lambropoulos and Emmanuel Billis as well, for allowing me to share those very, very interesting days that I spent with you. I've listened to many interesting speakers who raised very good issues, actually, including in my topic on AI. And I'm very honored to have this possibility to actually share a different view, maybe, that the one you're used to on the research side, which comes from practice, because I would define myself first and foremost as a practitioner and as a pragmatic person. And I will try to actually share with you some of the thoughts that I think are also the thoughts of at least some of my colleagues from the judiciary. So I will start with sharing with you three main ideas I would like to develop later in my presentation. And I will be a bit maybe provocative on purpose, because I think this is an area where we need brains to work. We actually don't need AI to tell us how to handle AI. We need brains, and we need smart people to think by themselves and look at the challenges and try to actually find maybe a beginning of solutions, and if we can, but actually that's a big challenge for the criminal justice system as well. So my first idea would be that I've heard a lot, and even during the conference, that AI is or can be biased. It's true. Let's agree with that. But I would like to add humans too. So we all heard about the hungry judge effect. I could also tell you from practice about how many evenings and nights I spent in court sitting on a trial, trying people at 2 a.m. Don't ask me if it's possible by law in France. It is. When you have cases and the trial is not over, then you go from one case to the other until it's finished. Sitting there for 12 hours in a row, except if you need to go to the bathroom. My question is, do you really think that my brain works the same at 1 p.m. or at 1 a.m.? So that's my provocative remark on this. And yesterday I went to a very interesting conference where actually there was some experiment from researchers trying to see if LLMs were actually more accurate in defining the sentence that human judges. We'll not get into details because we don't have time now, but it was very interesting because somebody was saying maybe actually the LLMs are, no, the human judges are more lenient than LLMs, which actually tended to aggravate the sentence compared to the human judges that were participating in the study. Well, my response to that would be that between 20 years ago, when I started as a prosecutor and as a judge, and now I'm not in court right now anymore, but if I go back to court tomorrow, yes, I've changed my mind on several kind of offenses, because when you tend to see the same kind of offenses over and over and over again, necessarily something happens on the cognitive side where you might consider that basically you've seen worse, and then you kind of change your level of perception. So my first point would be that humans, we are all biased, whether you like it or not, because of our education, because of our culture, because of our knowledge, because of our studies, because of our environment, our family, etc. So the following question would be, is indeed AI more or less biased than humans? And my answer to that would be, it depends, because I'm not sure what we're talking about today. AI is a very general term to encompass a lot of technologies, a lot of situations, a lot of use cases, and the answer to me is not going to be the same depending on the context in which you use a specific type of AI or another. So that was my first remark. The second remark I wanted to mention, also we talk about, I heard that maybe AI is not technology neutral, as for instance in the EU AI Act it's written. Well, we can discuss that because actually I have to say I'm more and more agnostic about it. I had a clear view, and then I'm just listening to all points of views. But my point is, at this time I'm convinced that a machine itself doesn't create itself alone. It can learn afterwards by itself. It's called machine learning, but it cannot create itself just randomly. You need a human in the first place. So is technology per se sitting on my desk, not being used, neutral? I believe so. Does it become a problem when the humans use it? Yes, I think so. So my point is, I'm not sure it's the technology itself that's not neutral. I would believe, and I would suggest as a provocative thought, that maybe it's the use of the technology that's not so technology neutral. The second main point I wanted to mention is and legitimately, we focus a lot on the dangers of AI, and among the dangers of AI used by public authorities, we focus on mass surveillance. Of course, it's legitimate. I'm not going to say otherwise. What I would like to mention is that this perception comes from other parts of the world. It's because we see examples in some parts of the world, and I'm taking the European perspective here, that we think maybe that's a danger too. We don't want that here. It's legitimate, and at the same time, I know from experience, because I had the chance and honor to represent France in different negotiations on AI. I see that the relationship between citizens and their state may differ a lot from one country to the other, even in Europe, even in the European Union itself. So my point is, it's not that we shouldn't be cautious, and it's not that we shouldn't care about this. My point is, maybe we should also take into account the fact that if you talk to a French person, for instance, let's say average French person, and if you talk to a person from an Eastern country in the European Union, for instance, because of their difference in history, because of their culture, because of their trauma, like collectively in history, they might not see the relationship to their state the same way. They might not fear the state the same way, which also explains why in EU negotiations, as you know, we have to negotiate between 27 countries, which is far from being easy, I have to admit. you have different stance that you can actually recognize in a lot of negotiations. And as soon as you have this point on what is the relationship between the state and the citizen, you can see our histories and our differences explain a lot of the differences that we may have on negotiations or on a topic. And I think on mass surveillance, that's also the case. Again, it's a real topic and we need to take care of it, but I'm just introducing that point as a supplementary point. And last but not least, now we don't have the same legal framework on AI, whether we like it or not. There are some things in the US, there was the US blueprint. There are things in UK, there are things in Asia, but in the European Union, we do have the EU AI Act that changes things. And in Europe, more largely, and actually with other countries not from Europe, we now have the Council of Europe's Framework Convention on AI, Human Rights, Democracy, and the Rule of Law. So we might not be able to analyze the impact of AI in criminal justice the same way with different framework, now that we have a beginning of frameworks. So my last point is, how do you regulate, or should you regulate? I'm not sure if anybody in the room would say, no, we shouldn't regulate AI at all. It's super great. You know, it regulates itself. But I guess we will all agree that we need some kind of regulation. The question is how and what? Because I will just come back on the AI Act in a minute, but it's very difficult, let me tell you from experience, to keep your principle and apply them in negotiations so that you can find a law between several countries with different legal framework, where at the end of the day, you're going to have people, professionals, judges, prosecutors, police officers, who will need to have a clear rule on what they can or what they can't do. If you don't have that part, it's nice to have nice principles, but at the end of the day, it will not work. So the question is, how do we regulate? So I've heard a lot during negotiations of the EU AI Act on the AI Act is missing this, and they don't talk about that. Yeah, I agree. It doesn't solve all the problems of the world. It's just the first step, but I will come back on this in a minute. So after I've exposed my three main points, I would like to talk about what is the present and future of AI in criminal justice and investigations. Don't worry, I will not make you an exhaustive list of what we do or don't, because it would be just totally impossible. Impossible because we generally know that the use of AI in criminal justice, as a general matter, is developing, but it's developing unequally. If you want to have a glance, maybe you already know, you can go to the website of the CEPES Resource Center on Cyber Justice and AI, and then you have a list of reported AI uses by countries in justice systems. So it can be criminal, can be civil, but they try to actually mention all the uses that are already effective in the countries. It's not just about Europe, so you have the US, India, and a lot of countries. What they say at the moment is that we are at about 160 uses of AI in justice systems all around the world. I mean, in the countries that are listed, I'm sorry. If I take out those of the countries listed that are not in Europe, if we talk about Europe as a whole, not just the European Union, I counted about 120 types of use. The problem is we don't really know what is included in or not, because when I see from my country in general, for France, they list 4 uses. In Germany, they list 27. In Spain, 37. In Spain, it's about 29. So meaning that AI is not developing equally in all countries, and just taking two different member states of the European Union, you're not going to have the same situation. So it's very complicated to know actually what's going on, because just remember that before the EU AI Act, we had no law at all, which means that you didn't have an obligation to report anything anyway. So when you asked the ministry, and I asked mine, they didn't know. They didn't know what the prison administration was doing because you didn't have any framework. So it's complicated to know exactly what the situation is. I truly think that it's changing because of the AI Act in the European Union, at least, because since we do have now to abide by the AI Act, actually administrations will have to know exactly what they do and to actually make it regular to abide by the AI Act. But the use of AI is not like we're doing that every day. I want to make clear, maybe in some other parts of the world, that's the case, but in criminal justice, I can tell you that people now know we do have some legislation. We can criticize it, that's okay with me, but we do have some legislation, and they are aware that they can't do what they did in the past anymore without any reporting or anything. So that's the good thing of having some kind of legislation. The second point I wanted to mention also is that from the citizen side, why do we talk about AI in criminal justice? The thing is, the citizen is demanding, and it's more and more demanding. They want security, they want equality, they want speed, but basically, and I see somebody from CIPOL, if I'm not mistaken, well, we don't have more means for investigations, and we have less people. That's a reality, we might like it or not, but the thing is, it's not easy to actually satisfy the societal demand. So what happens is that trust in justice is challenged, at least in my country and in several EU countries. So I don't know in yours, but the polls and the surveys are really, really worse and worse regarding the trust of citizens in justice systems. And you have this more and more demand from society for efficiency. So my point is, as a judge, okay, what is to be efficient? Is that the number of decisions I make every month? Or do they look at all at the quality of my decision if I have a complex case versus a simple case? Yes, of course, my ministry likes to have figures and numbers, but this is not what I call quality justice. So the demand is more and more for efficiency, and we also need clear rules and tools that work, because as I said in the beginning, it's nice to have principles, but we as professionals in the criminal justice systems, we need to know exactly what we can do and what we can't do. There is a gray zone always with technology, but at some point we need results. And I always want to remind people that there are offenders in cases, in criminal cases, but there are also victims. And victims also have a right to have an efficient criminal justice system. So time is running, so I will not dwell a lot on this, but you will have the slides anyway. But I just wanted to mention that the EU AI Act is not a criminal law legislation, as you know. It's not a data legislation, so it doesn't talk a lot about data. That's on purpose. That's a product legislation. It doesn't aim at solving other problems like copyright. It's not replacing GDPR, for instance, nor the law enforcement directive, as far as we are concerned. And it's only first step. It's a first try to regulate AI at supra-international level. So it's necessarily not perfect. But so far, who did better? That's the question. And can we do better? That's the next question. And it actually takes into account also, as you probably know, or if you don't, I just summarize it by saying that it took into account the sensitivity of AI in justice systems as a whole and in criminal investigations, because it decided that those uses, or many of those uses for investigation and administration of justice, would be necessarily either banned, which is the case of real-time biometric identifications with exceptions, but the principle is that there is a ban, and the administration of justice to AI for assistance of a judge is necessarily a high-risk AI system and according to that legislation, which means that they have to follow a number of rules just to be able to use the AI product. And it's not replacing criminal procedural rules that may come afterwards. So that's one thing. And I would like to finish by actually, because we're going to talk about it, I'm sure, in the follow-up questions. We talk a lot about AI and the robot judge. That's what I hear every time. People tell me about, you know, we're going to have robots deciding on our name. Yeah, but I would just like to remember from the, again, European perspective, EU perspective, if I may say. Again, it's not the case everywhere in the world for now, but Recital 61, actually, of the EU AI Act precisely says something about AI not replacing the decision-making of a human judge. So I don't know if many people have that in mind, but I think it's very interesting to remember in developing research also about EU in EU countries, because it changes a lot of things. It changes a lot of things considering what happens in other countries, other parts of the world, because yes, you may have experimentations in the US, for instance, if I'm not mistaken, in China also, but from what I read in the EU AI Act, having AI deciding on behalf of the judge is going to be, first of all, a legal challenge in the European Union. I don't know if you will agree with me, but this will raise many legal questions if countries decide to do so. So as a final point, I would like to actually raise a question. Instead of, should we use AI in investigations and criminal justice? Considering that AI is already all around you. Take an Uber, you go and get x-rays, you order food or whatever you do in your life as citizens, you're already using AI without even probably knowing it. It's everywhere. It's a real revolution. It's scary because it's more than the Industrial Revolution, according to many experts, because it doesn't really have an end. We're not going to end up with a final product that is 100% perfect and that works with no risk, just like a car or something. It does not happen like that. It's an ongoing process. You need actually governance on the way, because you're going to need to feed the system to make it more efficient. So we're going to need patience. The thing is, we can't wait until when, if you have no end. So the moment of deciding whether we use AI in criminal justice is now, unfortunately, whether we like it or not. So my proposal is from whether we should use AI in criminal justice and investigations, should we switch to the question of when and how could we use AI in a safe and ethical environment for the purpose of benefiting everybody? Like offenders, victims, society, judges, the justice system as a whole. Because we do have ways to improve the quality of justice systems with AI. This is my point of view. I wrote an article last year about the AI, using generative AI in the decision-making process, and I wrote it with an engineer. And we actually made the difference between a decision and a decision-making process, because when I decide as a judge, it's not like one day I wake up and I say, oh, okay, it's 8:12 in the morning, and then now I decide this on that case. No, it's a long intellectual process, and you have different steps. Some of the steps are indeed repeatable from one case to the other. Some of the other steps are not repeatable. But if you look at carefully of how the decision-making process is in a specific context, in a specific criminal justice context, because we do have different procedural rules also. That's another challenge in studying it. But in my country, for instance, we look at the process and we concluded that in some ways we could introduce AI. But my point of view, and I will finish by that because I'm running out of time, indeed, as a judge, my perspective, but it's just my personal opinion, is that there is at least one thing that shouldn't be replaced by AI. It's the decision itself. Because the decision is mine and my responsibility as a human judge to protect society and to do justice in a fair and equitable way. And I will stop here because I'm running out of time, but I will be happy to answer questions afterwards. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Very interesting, and there are so many things that you raise, so many topics. We are not going to be able to discuss them. I'll let you speak a little longer because it was so interesting what I was hearing about. Just before I give Mark the word, just to say, on your first point, only that the technology neutral problem, the godfather of modern AI, Geoffrey Hinton, I read a recent interview of him, and he said, oh, it's not exactly as you say. Machines will learn to create themselves, and this is his opinion. Machines will learn to write programs and to write codes and to develop themselves further and even to create themselves. So this is a point. And now turning to Mark, I would like to say also, connecting with what you say, should we use AI in criminal justice? I first met Mark at a conference a couple of years ago in Uppsala, and this conference was organized by yes, this conference. Sorry, I'm sorry, I have to put even that so we can see Mark's name. Sorry, Mark. And there, the professor who organized this conference actually said, no, and I'm with you on that, but he said, no, we have to put a stop when it is very risky, very dangerous. We should not use AI in criminal justice. We should even identify at least the applications and the uses that are really dangerous and prohibited. And I think during Mark's speech, we will hear about prohibited AI practices. So Mark, I'll give the word now to you.
Thank you very much, and good morning. It's wonderful to be with you here in Athens. Special pleasure for me. I've been here many times, but this is my first opportunity to speak with you. And in my presentation today, I'm going to explore some of the challenges that AI is creating in the field of criminology and criminal justice, and tell you also a bit about the organization that I founded, the Center for AI and Digital Policy, with the hope that you or some of your students may be interested in our work, would like to participate in our programs, perhaps join our network. Our organization began in part several years ago when I was working with the OECD, helping to draft the first governance framework for artificial intelligence. I was actually quite interested in the efforts that were underway to create codes of practice and ethical guidance for AI. And I looked around and found hundreds of these frameworks and compiled the ones that I thought were most interesting. But as I dug more deeply into the topic, I began to realize that it wasn't enough to look simply at the words that are published in guidance for AI, but actually to understand what countries were doing in practice with the AI systems that they were deploying. And for this reason, we undertook a big research program which has now produced what I believe is the most comprehensive report on AI published anywhere in the world. You can see printed in 2 volumes. It's available for free, by the way, on the internet. I put out some postcards with QR codes, and you're welcome to download this report. It represents the combined work of more than 1,000 researchers across 120 countries. But our aim in conducting this research was not simply to map what we understood national AI policies and practices to be. It was also to evaluate against 12 metrics that we had established how well national policies aligned with democratic values broadly understood. When we were talking about democratic values, we were talking about the opportunity for public participation in the development of national AI strategies, the transparency of AI decision-making, a topic that I'm going to return to, as well as support for international agreements to safeguard human rights, such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And this made it possible for us across these 12 metrics to evaluate countries' policies and practices, to rate them and to rank them. And you can see in the expanded chart from our 5-tier methodology the countries that we had placed at the top based on this methodology. But what is also interesting, I would suggest, is that in creating this methodology, it actually gives us the ability to look over time at various trends. I'm not proud of this, of course, but I think it's worth noting that we were able to show over the last several years continued improvement in the United States using our methodology to assess alignment with democratic values. But in the current year, using the same methodology, we notice a significant decline. And of relevance to you, I think, is that several of the factors do relate to criminology, criminal justice, and the protection of rights. We also are engaged in AI policy training. We certify participants in our clinics from around the world in a 12-week course that we offer. We're quite proud of the distribution of the participation in the clinics. We're underway now with our 10th cohort in the fall of 2025. We engage in advocacy. That's my colleague Merva Hickok testifying before the U.S. Congress a couple of years ago about the need to establish necessary guardrails for the deployment of AI, and we have several publications as well. This AI policy source book, which I mentioned I did originally in 2019, has now been updated, and you're welcome to find this online for free as well, containing the major governance frameworks. So that's a little bit about the background of the organization and what we do, and as I said, this is also an invitation if you're interested to learn more about us and to join with us in our work. I will say that in the last few years, one of the issues in the field of AI policy that has become of most interest to me is the increasing deployment of AI systems in criminal justice, judicial decision-making, and sentencing. So my background is as a lawyer and law professor, and I am of the view that the legal profession has a particular obligation to ensure fairness, accountability, and due process in the deployment of AI systems. But one of the problems we run into is that AI safeguards have largely been framed using the term explainability. And what I'm going to describe for you in a moment is the very important distinction between explainability and contestability. Contestability, which is my preferred term to establish accountability. Now, to get to this point, I need to introduce for you another concept, which is the notion of algorithmic transparency. And this is actually from an article I wrote several years ago, trying to explain that algorithmic transparency is actually the cornerstone of accountability. Now, I began my work in the field of AI many, many years ago, actually even before I became a lawyer. But back in those days, AI systems were very simple expert systems, maybe familiar to many of you, essentially decision trees, yes? Where you could encode a process looking at various branching outcomes and say, well, if this is true, we'll go here, and if this is true, we'll go here, and eventually we'll reach an outcome. And in that type of simple AI model, where human expertise is encoded as a series of choices, it's actually quite easy to find the basis of an outcome. In fact, if we think about sentencing guidelines, we have a number of factors that we might consider whether an offender gets a 6-month sentence or a 9-month sentence. Did they previously commit a crime? Were their good words said on their behalf at trial? And we can, with some precision, therefore assess whether the outcome is a good outcome. And if we don't like the outcome because the various pathways and ratings are transparent to us, we're able to make changes to produce a better outcome. The problem, of course, today with modern AI, which is built on vast data sets and the use of probabilistic analysis, is that we've moved from this determinist, symbolic system with provable outcomes to outcomes that are not actually provable but quite impressive. And we see this, for example, with the output of large language models. Now here, somewhat ironically, is a large language model explaining what explainable AI is. Now let's take a moment and look at this definition. Explainable AI is the ability to describe an AI model's decision and internal workings in terms that humans can understand, making complex models transparent and trustworthy. And this sounds like a very reasonable goal. Yes, I mean, we want AI systems to be explainable so that we have the ability to assess them. But here is now the key point, and I like to quote Karl Popper for this proposition. Insofar as a scientific statement speaks about reality, it must be falsifiable. And insofar as it is not falsifiable, it does not speak about reality. And the point that I'm making here is to simply explain an outcome does not tell us, in fact, if the outcome is correct. Indeed, if we rely on a notion of explainability as rationale, we are led to believe that the outcome is correct, and we are simply being provided the basis for the result that was produced. But that's actually a problem, and it's a particular problem in the field of criminology. And the way I think about this is I say explainability is a necessary but not sufficient condition for the deployment of AI systems. How is this issue addressed in some of the major frameworks for the governance of AI? I've taken here provision from the EU AI Act, which is, I think, likely to be quite influential, not only adopted by the EU member states, but also likely to be followed by many countries around the world, as was the GDPR, the Data Protection Regulation. The AI Act tells us that there must be a right to explanation of individual decision-making in high-risk AI systems. You may know that there are different levels of risk in the AI Act that produces legal effects or has an adverse impact. And what is it that we get to know about these systems? Well, we need clear and meaningful explanations of the role of the AI systems. Now, if you're following my argument, you should see that this is helpful but not enough. Even the recital, which is relevant to this particular article, says that we should have a basis on which the affected persons are able to exercise their rights. Now, in another legal framework, which is the Council of Europe AI Treaty, which I had some involvement with, when we considered a similar provision in the drafting of that treaty, we purposefully included the phrase, the right to contest the decision. You see the difference? We're not simply trying now to explain the outcome. We're putting front and center the possibility that the outcome may not be correct, and therefore people should have the mechanism available to challenge that outcome. Now, what information do we need to contest these decisions? Well, for an answer to this question, I actually looked back at some of the data privacy law here in Europe, which I believe provides us some guidance. I was very happy to see, for example, although not surprised, as you will see in a moment, and also related to the theme of this conference, the need to provide the logic involved in the decision. Now you see we're getting a bit more precise. We're not just getting an explanation of the outcome. We're being told that we have the right to meaningful information about the logic. This is a reference, by the way, to a recent decision of the Court of Justice, which is the High Court of the EU, in a case involving Dun & Bradstreet and credit scoring. Increasingly, litigants are saying, when these decisions are made about me regarding credit scoring, and I'm denied, for example, mobile service because a credit reporting agency says that I'm not a good customer, I have the right to know the basis of that decision. And the Court of Justice is saying increasingly, yes, you do. You do have the right to know the basis. It must be meaningful, and it may also include the logic. This is back to the Council of Europe. This is a 2016 update to the International Privacy Convention. A similar provision talks about knowledge of the reasoning underlying the data processing. Again, very similar to the logic. All of this actually stems from the original EU Data Protection Directive, which was adopted about 20 years ago. And here we see with some precision, when we exercise the right of access to automated decisions concerning individuals, what is it that we have the right to obtain access to? Knowledge of the logic. Now, what happens when we have an AI system where, for practical reasons, we can't obtain access to the logic? And again, keep in mind my discussion a moment ago about two different types of AI systems. The old-fashioned expert system with decision trees that was transparent and provable, and modern AI systems that rely on large data sets, are probabilistic, and use very opaque, complex algorithms that even the developers don't fully understand. I've written about what we call the AI red line challenge. And my proposal is simply that when we confront such systems, we have to prohibit their use. And I rely in part on a decision from the Court of Justice of the European Union in 2022. This was an interesting case. The case concerned screening of airline passengers before they boarded a plane to determine whether they might pose a risk to public safety. And many of the civil liberties organizations here in the EU, not surprisingly, were very concerned about this directive. They said this is a form of mass surveillance. You're investigating people without any criminal predicate. There's no basis to make such scoring decisions. Ultimately, the Court of Justice disagreed with the objections of the civil liberties advocates. They said that the regulation could stand, but in the opinion, and I won't spend time on it today because we don't really have much time, the court draws a remarkable distinction between the two AI systems that I've been talking about. And it said, in effect, for decisions concerning fundamental rights, we're okay with automated processing as long as it's with these expert systems where humans control the factors and the outcome. But we are not okay with AI systems that are probabilistic, that we can't comprehend, where machines are making determinations about who may pose a risk to public safety. And I wrote about this in an article. This is the Court of Justice of the European Union. The passenger name record decision unplugs the black box. I thought this was a very good outcome, even though the civil liberties organizations were disappointed that the legal authority remained to conduct surveillance of airline passengers. Now, I want to say a few more words about this red line concept because I actually think it's much more prominent than most people are aware. I recall when the High Commissioner for Human Rights of the United Nations, Michelle Bachelet, the former president of Chile, in 2021 said we must have a moratorium on AI systems that do not respect international human rights. It was a very bold statement, but it was also an important statement. And in the years that followed, international organizations incorporated her views into the frameworks that they established. UNESCO, in the recommendation on AI ethics, established prohibitions on social scoring and mass surveillance. The EU AI Act actually contains 8 categories. I've listed only, I think, 4 here, prohibitions on the use of AI systems. I mentioned a Court of Justice opinion from 2022, prohibitions on AI systems that cannot be contested, yes? And then finally, this loss of human control concept, which I will now say a few words about. So around the same time we were doing the work on the OECD AI principles, we were also preparing a framework called the Universal Guidelines for AI. All of this is available online, but I've also brought a few cards if you'd like to grab one. I think they're on a table out there. Our aim was to put in place broad principles that would align AI governance with human rights. And perhaps one of our most important principles, and several of these I think will look familiar to you, right to transparency and right to human determination. But it's actually the last principle, the termination obligation, which is closely aligned with this red line's objective. And we say in the termination obligation, an institution that has established an AI system has an affirmative obligation to terminate the system if human control of the system is no longer possible. Now, to me, actually, this seems like common sense and not a particularly radical proposal. But of course, we're living in a moment where we're also being told by many tech companies, welcome to the era of agentic AI. What is agentic AI? Agentic AI are AI systems that are given autonomy to act on our behalf through their interpretation. Yes? I'm reluctant to say that any AI system is fully autonomous because every AI system to some extent is a production of us, of what we create. But agentic AI challenges directly the notion that we should allow AI systems that are beyond human control. And so we actually propose that such systems should not be allowed. Well, I've raced through a number of topics with you this morning. I hope I've helped provoke some good discussion. Explainability is not sufficient. We need to be able to contest outcomes because outcomes may not be correct. If an AI system does not allow us to meaningfully contest an outcome, the AI system should not be deployed. In fact, there are many AI systems that should not be deployed, and it is remarkable to see today in international governance frameworks for artificial intelligence how broadly that proposition has been accepted. That's a brief summary of what we've said. But finally, I'll end with an appeal, because in this moment we are gathering support for the Council of Europe Treaty on Artificial Intelligence, Democratic Values, Human Rights and the Rule of Law, and I'm actually proud to say that we have 42 countries that have endorsed, including the member states of the European Union. So we are making good progress, but knowing also that this is a global conference and that many of you in your own countries may be interested in supporting some of this work to help make AI accountable. We'd invite you to visit our website, learn more, see if your country has supported this initiative. If not, reach out to us, and we're happy to work with you. Finally, we have our famous laptop sticker, our view of AI, filter coffee, not people. Thank you very much.
Great, Mark. Thank you very much. Excellent talk. Now, we do not have much time. There's so many questions that I would like to raise, but I think I will give the floor to the audience. But I would like to make a point. Of course, it's not a new one, but indeed, we need to have knowledge of the logic involved, yes, but we do not always have knowledge of the logic involved also in the human judges' decisions. And I don't know if we want to have, I don't know, if we want to exclude human judges that we do not know also their knowledge or prohibit them. This is not an easy discussion. What I know is that, what I feel, because I'm also writing on these topics, is that indeed explainability, in my view, could broaden social legitimacy. And the same, of course, with contesting a decision. And so this is an important part of the agenda. How we do it, if machines will create themselves further, if it will be possible to terminate the machines at some point. What is the role of criminal law in this? What is the law of criminology in this? What can they offer in controlling the machines and in contesting the decisions? These are not easy discussions. I finished a book exactly on that. In any case, I will give the word to the audience because I have so many questions. If we discuss them, there will be no public debate. So if you like, if someone has questions.
Hello, everybody. Thank you all for your wonderful presentations. My name is Vasja Badarić from the Institute of Criminology in Ljubljana, Slovenia. I have a question for Mr. Rothenberg. So I wanted to ask you if in your research, this comprehensive review of AI practices, policies, did you also had the opportunity to focus on AI in military use? So as we know, militaries are increasingly using AI. They're very secretive when they do this, so we don't know exactly what kind of machines they use, what kind of machine learning systems. I'm interested if you could do research on the use of AI in the target selection process, because they use AI to select military targets. And also, do you think it would be possible to contest the choices that AI produces in the selection of targets? Because it did not yet happen, but in the future, let's say victims of attacks that they were based on AI decisions, the victims of attacks could go to court and demand, how this program chose a specific target, and victims might want to contest this decision. No? So, is this possible? I mean, or is this like a total, let's say, black hole and not possible to do research on this? Thank you so much.
So these are very good questions. Let me answer the first part by saying, yes, we have actually reviewed country practices regarding the use of AI in the military. This is generally considered under the category of laws, lethal autonomous weapon systems, and there has been an effort underway at the United Nations for several years to have a convention to limit the use of autonomous weapon systems. To your second point, I've never thought till this moment about applying the principle of contestability to the use of AI in warfare. Frankly, I think the greater concern that most countries have right now is actually the loss of control. And a lot of work is underway to ensure that even countries that are, let's say, proud of their AI systems are simultaneously able to manage them, because the risk is quite significant, particularly as warfare accelerates and countries rely more on semi-autonomous weapon systems like drones, for example. I think we will need greater scrutiny and greater transparency.
Hi, thank you for your presentations. My question is also for Dr. Rothenberg. In regards for the decline after the significant progress that was made in the democratic values through the graph that you showed, I wanted to ask you why you think that is, this significant decline in 2025, and if you think a change of governance or perhaps some policies could help reverse the decline. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. One of the reasons we undertook this big report was to provide the ability for countries to see an assessment as to how their AI policies and practices were aligned with democratic values. The decision of the current administration in the United States to disassociate from UNESCO, for example, and the recommendation on AI ethics, we consider to be a move in the wrong direction. But this is not a snap decision, political decision in this moment. It's actually based on the methodology we had set out 5 years ago. So we feel that it's reasonably objective. In similar fashion, the decision of the administration to listen only to the tech CEOs about AI policy and not broader stakeholder groups such as academics and civil society is again, under our pre-existing methodology, a move in the wrong direction. But to your point, of course, all of this can be reversed. And what we are trying to do with this report is provide guidance to countries and say, when you open up the process so that more of the public can participate, when you respect international agreements, we will acknowledge this and the scores will go up. And we've actually seen this happen in many countries over the last several years. So it's actually quite encouraging from that perspective.
Hello, my question goes to both of you, and thank you very much for your presentation. I would like to know if there are countries, because we know that AI has been used for the risk assessment before release, but are there countries that are using it during sentencing or for competency to stand trial or for criminal responsibility? Thank you very much.
I know, of course, in the US, you had some experimentation. In Europe, that's not so clear when you look at the resource center that I was talking about, the resource center, the CEPEJ, on cyber justice and AI, it's not so developed, but indeed it's more developed in actually trying to, for orientation of actually pre-release from prison rather than sentencing itself. But that might be my personal opinion, but I feel like on sentencing itself, I think in Europe we're kind of cautious. And I remember that I think it was in Estonia, if I'm not mistaken, a few years ago, they started to announce that we would have like an AI judge or something like that, and indeed it was not so clear, and at the end of the day it was not really implemented. And also the other thing I think we need to take into account is that the AI Act is on the table since 2021, and AI goes very fast. It evolves very fast. But since 2021, from my experience, I see that public authorities in Europe, at least, are really like cautious about what they can implement on the stage of the sentencing itself, because they really don't know what they're allowed to do. So if you invest in deploying a system for which actually 3 years after in the negotiations it's going to be totally banned, it doesn't make real much sense in terms of efficiency for the justice system. So I think they were reluctant far ahead of the adoption of the AI Act, which is why I don't think it's so developed on that specific part of the process. But I may be wrong, but I don't have any. I know that in Spain they do have in Catalonia this use for actually, again, early release, but on the other sites that you mentioned, I'm not sure we have a lot of use.
Yeah, we do discuss this issue in our report. And I know you'll find AI used for sentencing in the US, China, Brazil, Spain, which you mentioned, and many other countries as well.
I think for me, as I see it, is also the problem of technology, the technological progress, and which kind of model you apply. So if you apply a rule-based model, an expert system model, perhaps there have been many attempts. If you apply now a machine learning model for sentencing, you need to have a fully digitalized criminal justice system to begin with. And this is not the case in many, many countries of Europe. Also, there are so many problems of if a machine can understand what leniency is, if a machine can understand what proportionality is, if a machine can really understand what's the logos behind the punishment in order to deliver a fair punishment. So this is a pretty complex, I think, problem.
I would just like to take your question to actually add some point about my perception in Europe, at least, is that we often think of deploying AI in the criminal justice system in terms of top to bottom approach, which means that we have a supranational strategy and we decide we're going to deploy AI, which is actually what's happening in France as well. This is interesting, but my question is actually going back to the point of what Emmanuel just said. But what AI are we talking about? What kind of systems? For what purpose? In what context? With what governance? With what safeguards, et cetera, et cetera. So we talk about AI as a one thing, and then we decide we're going to deploy AI. But I'm not sure about this approach. I always tend to think that it has to come from bottom to top so that we know exactly what we need, for what purpose, what are the red lines, and Mark was talking about the red line, and I also strongly believe that we need laws, we need bans, but I also believe that as a society, we should be able to actually have red lines that are societal red lines, and for some purposes, we decide that AI is not going to be used, and that's it. Do you really need a law? Well, probably in some countries you would say yes, because you never know about political changes and reverse, but this top-to-bottom approach, which kind of tends to forget the users. And by the way, just to introduce another topic, because there are so many things to say about this, AI literacy is 0 right now among judges, prosecutors, and a bit more among police officers because they start to use tools, but it's close to 0. So the thing is, I know a lot of my colleagues coming to me and say, oh, we need AI, and I said, for what purpose? Oh, to make it quicker, to make it faster, to save time. Yeah, but it doesn't work like that. I need to know exactly what your needs are. I need to know exactly what kind of AI is available at that moment in time to reach your purpose. I need to know, are you going to be able at your local level to actually train it, control it, supervise it? Who is going to do that? Are you going to include social society in your court? Are you going to include lawyers, which I believe should be at least? How are you going to do that? Because most of my colleagues think that they're going to get a machine and they're going to push a button and that's it. And work is done. No, it doesn't work like that.
So we have time for 2 or 3 more questions.
Thank you. This is a question to both or either of you about this idea of, and I agree with you, we need to ask when and how to use it rather than whether to use it. I think we are all aware of the dangers of AI being trained on human output, which is biased. But there's more and more talk of AI now being trained on its own outputs, and that potentially leading to model collapse. I think that's obviously a bigger danger in the wider society where AI is looking at the whole of the internet and the slop that is out there, and the outputs are degrading and degrading. Hopefully that's less of an issue within the criminal justice system where we are inputting more carefully the data that it's trained on. But in the long term, that is a danger as well, I think, that the more we use AI, the more it trains itself on itself. And I was just wondering how that has come into your thinking about the guidelines, or the ethics, the protocols that we should be using, to both of you.
That's a wonderful question. I learned a phrase a few years ago, which I think you all should pick up, which is epistemological collapse, which is a reference to the idea that as our knowledge base becomes increasingly polluted by AI outputs, we actually don't know what we know or how we know it. And you know, there's certainly been some commentary recently that suggests this could happen fairly quickly. I don't spend too much time with science fiction, except for a few good movies on Netflix. But I can see the risk. I wanted also on your question to, just if I may, comment on something that Manos said at the beginning of the panel. When I make this argument for transparency in AI decision-making, people oftentimes say, well, people aren't transparent in their decisions, so why should we expect machines to be more transparent than people are? But in fact, if we think in particular about the legal profession and the role of judges, that's precisely the responsibility of a judge, is to provide the rationale, the reasoning for the outcome that she has reached. And I think that's actually sort of at the core of human autonomy, is for us to understand and articulate the basis of our decisions. So I don't see the two as being at all the same, just to make this point.
So one last question, please, and that's it.
May I ask a question about this opaque nature of some of the machine learning module that you're talking about, and the use of some of them in predictive policing field that we already see? How can we, rather than throwing the kind of baby with the bathwater kind of scenario, how can you make that more accountable in terms of using those predictive models, rather than saying we shouldn't be using any of them?
Right. So I think that's one of the great challenges today. And I mentioned, you know, science fiction movies. I'm actually a big fan of the movie Minority Report with Tom Cruise. I don't know, I see a few smiles here, so a few people know what I'm referring to. But it's a wonderful movie. If you're teaching courses on predictive policing, I always include an excerpt from that movie. One of the great concerns with opaque systems, of course, is that you can embed bias, you can hide bias. You know, we might say with a transparent AI system, race should never be a factor. We should never give someone a longer criminal sentence because of their race or nationality. But if we can embed that factor because it has predictive value, or we have a proxy for that factor in our complex model, and it appears more scientific, it actually escapes oversight. So I think those are the kinds of challenges we face, particularly around predictive policing. And I'll say also, because we have the problem in the United States, we have these companies that say, oh, well, you want to reduce recidivism, the number of people, you know, going back to jail. And our brilliant model, you know, is 99% reliable, and here are all the studies. But you never actually have access to the logic, yes? The logic that produced the outcome. You actually don't know if the outcomes are fair or just, even if they're scientific, which is a very interesting challenge in the moment.
All right, I think we can now, you would like to ask something very quickly? There's one question, last question, please. There are two ones. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you there. Please.
I'll try to be short. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but AI works based on fixed algorithms and logic rules, which is trained on huge databases. And right now, it's like a child. The way you train it, that's how it will grow. So first thing is to train it better. Also, AI is just a tool. Even if it shows sign of axiological thinking, it's just a program without its own will, so it doesn't operate without a command. If AI collects some data, it does it at someone's request. So I don't understand why everyone blames the AI and no one tries to see the person behind this request. Thank you.
So there are two interrelated problems there. First of all, I agree with you. People can hide behind AI systems, and you can have poorly managed systems that the opacity conceals. And we should never ignore that as a problem. That's always been around with IT. But there is something else with AI which I find very intriguing. So here's another phrase for you to learn. Emerging capabilities. If you say to an AI system, and by this I mean simply instruct it with a rule, preserve the ability to solve problems I might give you in the future, that's a reasonable rule to give an AI system, the AI system might engage in behavior called power seeking, for example. It might say, well, I need access to energy plants so that I can solve a problem I might be given in the future. And now the AI, based on your ambiguous instruction, is actually trying to maneuver to take over power plants because it thinks it will be able to assist you. Yes? I need more paper clips. Suddenly we all become paper clips. And it is striking to me, if you read the writings of some of the world's greatest AI innovators, I'm thinking of the Nobel scientist Geoffrey Hinton, for example, who are really worried about this, about the emerging capabilities of power seeking, of deceit, an AI program that has its program upgraded, but secretly keeps an old version of its operating system, thinking it might need it in the future, and conceals that activity from the manager of the system. So these times are very interesting, yes? All the more reason we need good rules for AI governance.
Just a quick comment to complete. On your question, actually, I join Mark on the fact that maybe the situation might be more nuanced. because again, to go back to the beginning of my presentation, the problem is we talk about AI as a unique phenomena with all the same characteristics all the way, but all the time. But the problem is we're talking about very different systems and very different contexts. Where actually I like your provocative question is that, again, I believe that the main problem at the moment is the use of AI and not technology itself. But sometimes, from my experience, and in particular in the negotiations about regulation, I have the impression that we are trying to make some rules to prevent things that are actually, we don't trust humans enough. So maybe we are trying to regulate technology itself, but indeed at the end of the day, it's because we don't have trust in humans in some situations. So that's where I join your comment on that.
I believe we should finish now this very interesting session panel. Thank you very much once again, also on behalf of the local organizing committee. Thank you all for being here, for being all these days here for these very provocative discussions. And now I don't know what comes next with the program, but yeah, on our behalf, thank you very much.